There are certain mornings that begin like any other. The sun rises over the valley. Coffee brews in kitchens across town. Children wake for school. And then in the span of minutes, everything changes. The world splits into before and after. In the year 2000, in a quiet California community where neighbors knew each other's names and front doors stayed unlocked, a young woman vanished. Her name was Sofia Ramirez. She was 23 years old. She had dark hair that fell past her shoulders and a smile that her mother would later describe as capable of lighting up entire rooms. On the morning of March 14, 2000, Sofia left her apartment to walk 3 blocks to the corner market. She never arrived. The distance between her door and the store was less than a quarter mile. Somewhere in those few hundred yards, Sofia disappeared. For 25 years, her family waited. They searched, they grieved, they wondered. And then, in the winter of 2025, an arrest was made that would shock everyone who thought they knew this story. The question that haunted a community for a quarter century was not what happened to Sofia Ramirez, but who could have done this, and how did they hide in plain sight for so long? The town of Riverdale sat in California's Central Valley, nestled between agricultural fields that stretched toward distant mountains. In the year 2000, the population hovered around 15,000. It was the kind of place where Friday night football games drew crowds, where the same families had farmed the same land for generations, where everyone recognized the vehicles passing on Main Street. The economy relied on agriculture and the businesses that supported it. Tractors rumbled through town at dawn. The smell of fresh earth and irrigation water hung in the air during planting season. On weekends, families gathered at Memorial Park, where oak trees provided shade and children climbed on playground equipment that had been there since the 1970s. Sofia Ramirez lived in a small apartment complex on the east side of town. The building was modest, 2 stories with exterior staircases and parking spaces marked by faded yellow paint. She had moved there 6 months earlier, taking a job at a medical office where she worked as a receptionist. Those who knew her said she was punctual, organized, always professional. She kept her workspace decorated with photographs of her younger siblings. She brought lunch from home most days, usually leftovers from dinners she cooked in her small kitchen. Her apartment was on the 2nd floor, Unit 12. Through her living room window, she could see the street below, and beyond that, the roofline of the elementary school 3 blocks away. March 14, 2000 was a Tuesday. The weather forecast called for partly cloudy skies with temperatures reaching the mid-60s. Sofia had worked the day before, a typical Monday shift that ended at 5 in the evening. Her coworkers remembered seeing her leave through the front entrance, waving as she walked to her car, a silver Honda Civic she had purchased used the previous summer. That evening, according to phone records that investigators would later examine, she spoke with her mother for 18 minutes. They discussed ordinary things, her mother's garden, Sofia's plans to visit that coming weekend, a recipe for enchiladas. Nothing seemed unusual, nothing suggested fear or concern. The next morning, Sofia woke at 7. Her alarm clock, found later exactly as she had left it, was set for that time every weekday. The coffee maker in her kitchen had been programmed to brew at 6:45. According to what investigators pieced together from the scene, she had poured herself a cup. The mug sat on the counter, still half full when they arrived. She had gotten dressed. Her work clothes from the previous day hung on the back of her bedroom door. She wore jeans and a light blue sweater. Her purse sat on the small table by her front door, but her wallet was missing. So were her keys. At approximately 8:15 that morning, Sofia left her apartment. A neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who lived in Unit 10 directly across the exterior walkway, heard Sofia's door close. She heard footsteps descending the metal stairs. This detail she remembered clearly because she had been watering the potted plants that lined her balcony, and she glanced up to wave. Sofia waved back. She smiled. She said good morning. Mrs. Chen would repeat this detail dozens of times in the days and years that followed. Sofia seemed normal, completely normal, cheerful even. The corner market sat at the intersection of Elm Street and 4th Avenue. The owner, a man named Robert Park, who had run the store for 32 years, knew most of his regular customers by name. Sofia stopped there 2 or 3 times a week, usually for small items: milk, bread, sometimes a magazine. That morning, the store opened at 7:30, just as it did every day except Sunday. Robert was behind the counter. A teenage employee was stocking shelves in the back. Between 8 and 9 that morning, 7 customers came and went. Robert remembered each one. Sofia was not among them. By 10 that morning, Sofia had not arrived at work. The medical office where she was employed sat on the opposite side of town, a 12-minute drive from her apartment. Her shift began at 9. She had never been late, not once in the 6 months she had worked there. The office manager, a woman named Patricia Nguyen, called Sofia's apartment at 9:20. The phone rang. No one answered. Patricia called again at 9:45. Again, no answer. By 10:30, Patricia felt uneasy. This was not like Sofia. She called Sofia's mother. Sofia Ramirez answered the phone in her kitchen 20 miles away, in the neighboring town of Fresno. When Patricia explained that Sofia had not shown up for work and was not answering her phone, Maria felt something cold settle in her stomach. She told Patricia she would drive to Riverdale immediately. She called her husband, Eduardo, who worked in construction. He left his job site and met her at Sofia's apartment by 11:15. The apartment door was locked. Eduardo knocked. He called Sofia's name. Silence. He used the spare key Sofia had given them months earlier. The door swung open. The apartment was quiet. The coffee mug sat on the counter. Sofia's bed was made. Her bathroom showed signs of morning routine, toothbrush damp, towel hanging on the rack. Everything looked ordinary except for one detail that made Maria's breath catch. Sofia's cell phone sat on the kitchen counter, plugged into the charger. She had left without it. Eduardo called the Riverdale Police Department at 11:43. The call log recorded his voice as steady but urgent. His daughter was missing. She had left for the store hours ago. She had not arrived at work. Her phone was here. Her car was still in the parking lot. The dispatcher asked standard questions. How old was Sofia? Did she have any medical conditions? Had there been any recent arguments or problems? Eduardo answered each question. No medical issues. No arguments. She was responsible. Something was wrong. The first patrol unit arrived at 12:10. Officer Daniel Hayes stepped out of his vehicle and approached the parents waiting on the exterior walkway outside Unit 12. He took notes as Eduardo and Maria explained the timeline. Left around 8:15. Should have walked 3 blocks to the market. Never arrived. Never came home. Officer Hayes asked to see inside the apartment. They showed him. He observed the same details they had. Everything in order. Cell phone charging. No signs of struggle or disturbance. By 1 in the afternoon, additional officers had arrived. They began canvassing the neighborhood. They knocked on doors. They asked if anyone had seen Sofia that morning. Mrs. Chen recounted waving to her around 8:15. Another neighbor, a man who worked night shifts and had been arriving home around that time, remembered seeing a young woman matching Sofia's description walking down the sidewalk toward Elm Street. He had been parking his truck. He noticed her because she had been walking quickly, purposefully. He did not see anyone with her. He did not see any vehicles stop or slow. The walk from Sofia's apartment to the corner market followed a straightforward route. Out of the apartment complex parking lot, turning right onto Elm Street, walking 3 blocks north to 4th Avenue. The sidewalk was uneven in places, cracked by tree roots and time. Along the route sat a mixture of single-family homes and small businesses, a dry cleaner, a tax preparation office that was only busy during certain months, an auto repair shop. Between the apartment and the market, there were countless places where someone could have been pulled from the sidewalk. A narrow alley between buildings, the repair shop parking lot, the stretch where tall oleander bushes blocked the view from the street. By mid-afternoon, over 30 people were searching. Volunteers from the community joined law enforcement. They walked the 3-block route repeatedly, examining every inch. They looked in dumpsters, they checked backyards, they peered into parked cars. They found nothing. No purse, no wallet, no keys. No sign that Sofia had ever walked that path that morning. It was as though she had simply evaporated between her apartment door and the market entrance. The Riverdale Police Department contacted the Fresno County Sheriff's Department. Given the circumstances and the fact that Sofia was an adult who had been missing less than 12 hours, the case existed in uncertain territory, but the details troubled everyone who heard them. A responsible young woman, no history of running away, left without her phone, never arrived at her destination. As the sun lowered toward the horizon that first day, investigators began to treat this as something other than a missing person case. Search dogs arrived just before sunset. German shepherds trained in tracking scent. They were given items from Sofia's apartment, a worn sweatshirt, a pillowcase from her bed. The dogs picked up her scent immediately at the apartment entrance. They followed it down the stairs, across the parking lot, onto the sidewalk. They moved north on Elm Street just as witnesses said she had walked, but halfway to the market, near a spot where the sidewalk passed the auto repair shop, the dogs stopped. They circled. They whined. The scent ended. One handler, a veteran of dozens of searches, looked at the lead investigator and shook his head. The scent trail stopped cold, as if Sofia had been lifted from that exact spot. As darkness fell on March 14, 2000, portable lights were set up along Elm Street. The search continued through the night. Maria and Eduardo Ramirez sat in their car in the apartment complex parking lot, unwilling to leave, unable to help. Neighbors brought them coffee. Strangers offered words of comfort that meant nothing against the growing certainty that something terrible had happened. The swing set in the small playground area of the apartment complex hung motionless. The streetlights cast long shadows, and somewhere in those shadows, Sofia had vanished. Part 2. The investigation expanded rapidly in the days following Sofia's disappearance. By the morning of March 15, detectives from the Fresno County Sheriff's Department had joined Riverdale Police. The FBI was notified. Protocol for cases involving potential abduction. A command center was established in the Riverdale Community Center, a low building near the park, where folding tables were arranged in rows and whiteboards covered the walls. Maps of the area hung beside timelines tracking Sofia's last known movements. Photographs of her smiling face were posted on every surface. Search teams organized into grids. The area surrounding the 3-block route was divided into sections. Volunteers walked shoulder to shoulder through empty lots. They searched drainage ditches. They examined the banks of the irrigation canals that crisscrossed the agricultural land surrounding the town. Divers checked retention ponds and waterways. Helicopters flew overhead, searching from above for any sign of disturbed earth or abandoned items. The search radius extended 5 miles, then 10, then 20. Fields of crops were walked row by row. Abandoned farm buildings were cleared. Nothing was found. The media arrived on March 16. News vans from Fresno, from Bakersfield, eventually from as far as Sacramento and Los Angeles, parked along Main Street. Reporters stood in front of Sofia's apartment complex delivering updates. The story spread. Young woman vanishes during short walk to store. No trace found. Family desperate for answers. Sofia's photograph appeared on television screens throughout California. Her mother made tearful pleas for information. Anyone who saw anything, anyone who knew anything, please come forward. The community response was immediate and overwhelming. Hundreds of people volunteered. They distributed flyers. They organized prayer vigils. Local businesses donated food and supplies for searchers. The corner market where Sofia had been headed posted a reward for information leading to her whereabouts. The amount grew as donations poured in. $1,000, $5,000, $10,000. Everyone wanted to help. Everyone wanted to believe she would be found safe. But behind the scenes, investigators were following leads that pointed in darker directions. They interviewed everyone who lived or worked along Elm Street. They checked registered offenders in the area. They examined recent crimes, looking for patterns or connections. They pulled traffic camera footage from intersections blocks away, scanning for any vehicle that might have been in the vicinity that morning. They compiled lists of every car owner, every person who had been seen in the area, every phone call made from nearby locations. One name surfaced repeatedly in those early days: Thomas Brennan. Age 37, he owned the auto repair shop on Elm Street, the same shop where the search dogs had lost Sofia's scent. He had owned the business for 6 years. He lived alone in a small house 4 blocks from his shop. Those who knew him said he was quiet, kept to himself, seemed competent at his work. His shop had steady business. Customers described him as professional, if not particularly friendly. He did good work at fair prices. He opened at 8 every morning. He closed at 6 most evenings. On the morning of March 14, Thomas had been at his shop. He told investigators this when they first interviewed him on March 16. He had arrived around 7:45, he said. He had been alone. He had worked on a brake job for a customer's truck until approximately 9:30. He did not remember seeing Sofia walk past. He did not remember anything unusual. The shop sat back from the sidewalk about 30 feet, with a small parking lot in front where customer vehicles sat. From inside the garage bays, the sidewalk was visible but not clearly. The interview was brief. Thomas seemed cooperative. He answered questions directly. Investigators noted his responses and moved on to other witnesses, but small details began to accumulate. A neighbor who lived behind the repair shop told deputies she had heard a vehicle engine start around 8:30 that morning. She remembered because it was loud, possibly a truck with a bad muffler, and it had lasted only a few seconds before cutting off. When asked, Thomas said he had not started any vehicles that morning until after 9. Another witness, a mail carrier who walked his route along Elm Street every weekday, said he had passed the repair shop around 8:45. He had seen Thomas standing outside one of the garage bays, looking down the street toward where Sofia's apartment complex sat. The mail carrier thought nothing of it at the time. People stand outside businesses. They look at streets, but the detail was noted. Investigators requested permission to search Thomas Brennan's auto shop. He agreed without hesitation. On March 18, deputies walked through every bay, examined every tool, looked in every corner. The shop was organized. Parts were labeled. Work orders were filed. They found nothing suspicious. No blood, no signs of struggle, no items belonging to Sofia. They asked to search his house. Again, Thomas agreed. He signed the consent form. He watched as investigators went through his rooms. His house was modest, sparsely furnished, clean but not immaculate. They found nothing. Still, something bothered the lead detective, a veteran investigator named Richard Moss, who had worked missing persons cases for 15 years. He could not articulate exactly what it was. Thomas's cooperation seemed genuine. His alibi was thin but not impossible. He had been alone at his shop, no witnesses to confirm his presence, but many people start their workdays alone. Thomas's demeanor was calm, perhaps too calm. When asked about Sofia, about a young woman vanishing steps from his business, Thomas showed concern but not alarm. He offered to help in any way. He answered every question. He never asked for a lawyer. Deputy Moss wrote in his notes that night, "Subject cooperative, almost rehearsed." Bears continued observation. The investigation expanded to include Sofia's personal life. Detectives interviewed her friends, her co-workers, her former boyfriends. They examined her phone records, her bank account, her email. They found nothing unusual, no threats, no stalkers, no secret relationships. Sofia's life was exactly as her family had described. She worked, she spent time with friends. She was saving money to eventually attend nursing school. She called her mother twice a week. She was planning to visit her younger sister's birthday party that upcoming weekend. Everything pointed to a woman with plans, with a future, with no reason to disappear. As March turned to April, the search efforts began to slow. Volunteers still came, but in smaller numbers. The media coverage decreased. The story slipped from front pages to inside sections, then disappeared altogether from some outlets. The investigation continued, but leads grew cold. Detectives followed up on tips that led nowhere. A woman matching Sofia's description seen at a gas station, 2 counties away, turned out to be someone else entirely. A caller claiming to know what happened provided details that did not match evidence. The reward money sat unclaimed. By May, the case was effectively stalled. Every viable lead had been pursued. Every witness had been interviewed. The family held a memorial service at the Catholic church on the edge of town, though they refused to use words like funeral or final. This was not an ending. This was a pause in their search for their daughter. Maria Ramirez stood at the front of the church, surrounded by photographs of Sofia at every age. Baby pictures, school portraits, recent snapshots. She spoke to the gathered crowd. "Someone knows something," she said. "Someone saw something. Please, if you have any information, come forward. Help us bring Sofia home." Investigators continued to circle back to Thomas Brennan. His business sat too close to where Sofia vanished. The timing was too convenient. But without evidence, without witnesses, without a body, they had nothing to justify continued scrutiny. Thomas continued his routine. He opened his shop every morning. He worked on cars. He went home every evening. If he felt the weight of suspicion, he never showed it. Those who spoke with him in the months after Sofia's disappearance said he seemed unchanged, quiet as always, focused on his work, living his life. The Riverdale Police Department and Fresno County Sheriff's Department kept the case open. They filed reports. They logged tips. But as summer arrived and no new information emerged, Sofia Ramirez's disappearance joined the ranks of unsolved cases. Her photograph remained on bulletin boards in the command center. Her file remained in active status, but the daily urgency faded. Life in Riverdale moved forward, though the absence of answers hung over the community like morning fog that never quite burned away. For those who have ever doubted someone you love, who have felt suspicion gnaw at certainty, you understand the corrosive power of not knowing. Maria and Eduardo Ramirez lived with that uncertainty every day. They moved through their routines. Eduardo went to work. Maria cooked meals. But part of them remained frozen on that Tuesday morning in March when their daughter had walked out of her apartment and vanished. The case went cold. The tip line grew quiet. The search grids were folded and filed away. And Thomas Brennan continued to repair cars on Elm Street, 3 blocks from where Sofia Ramirez had last been seen alive. Part 3. The silence 2 years after Sofia disappeared, her parents left Riverdale. The small town had become unbearable. Every street corner held memories. Every passing car might contain someone who knew something. The weight of not knowing had pressed down on them until remaining felt impossible. They moved to Sacramento, where Maria's sister lived. They found a small house in a quiet neighborhood. Eduardo found work with a different construction company. Maria took a job at a grocery store. They tried to build something resembling a normal life from the ruins of what they had lost. But grief has no geography. Distance does not erase absence. In their new home, Sofia's bedroom remained prepared, waiting. Her clothes hung in the closet. Her books sat on shelves. On her birthday each year, Maria baked her favorite cake, chocolate with vanilla frosting, and set it on the kitchen table. They did not eat it. They simply sat and remembered. This ritual continued year after year. 2001, 2002, 2003. The candles numbered 24, 25, 26, counting years Sofia would never live. In Riverdale, life continued. The auto repair shop on Elm Street remained in business. Thomas Brennan still owned it, still worked there 6 days a week. He expanded slightly in 2004, hiring a young mechanic to help with the increasing workload. The business had a good reputation. Customers returned. The small parking lot usually held 3 or 4 vehicles awaiting service. Thomas seemed settled, permanent, a fixture of the community. But those who paid attention noticed small things. Thomas never married. He dated occasionally, brief relationships that ended without drama or explanation. He lived in the same small house. He followed the same routines. Every morning he arrived at his shop before 8. Every evening he left after 6. On Sundays, the shop was closed, and neighbors sometimes saw him working in his yard or washing his truck in the driveway. He attended church sporadically, sitting in the back pew, leaving immediately after services ended. He was polite but distant, present but separate. Clear's throat in 2007, something shifted. A new family moved into one of the houses on Thomas's Street. They had a daughter, 9 years old, who rode her bicycle up and down the block after school. Her name was Emma. She had blonde hair usually pulled into a ponytail. She wore bright-colored shirts. She was friendly, waving to neighbors, stopping to pet dogs, asking if she could help with yard work. Thomas watched her sometimes from his front porch. Neighbors noticed. They mentioned it to each other in lowered voices. He is just watching, just sitting there. It is probably nothing. But the watching made them uncomfortable. One afternoon in late summer, Emma's bicycle chain broke while she rode past Thomas's house. She stopped in front of his driveway, examining the chain tangled in the gears. Thomas had been outside, trimming the hedge along his fence. He set down his tools. He walked over. "Need help with that?" he asked. Emma looked up. "The chain came off," she said. "I can fix it," Thomas offered. "I have tools in the garage." Emma's mother, watching from their porch 3 houses down, felt something tighten in her chest. She called out, "Emma, come home and we'll fix it later." Her voice was firm. Emma looked between Thomas and her mother. "Okay," she said. She walked her bicycle back toward home, the chain clicking against the frame. Thomas stood in his driveway, watching. When Emma's mother told her husband about the incident that evening, he contacted the police. He did not report a crime. He reported a feeling, a concern, an unease. The officer who took the report was young, new to the department. He wrote down the details. Man offered to help child with bicycle, child's mother uncomfortable. The officer checked for any records on Thomas Brennan. He found the old interviews from the Sofia Ramirez investigation. He found nothing else. No arrests, no complaints. The report was filed. A patrol unit drove past Thomas's house more frequently for a few weeks. Nothing unusual was observed. The heightened attention faded, but Emma's family remained vigilant. They told their daughter not to speak to the man at that house. They made sure she never rode her bicycle alone. When they saw Thomas outside, They called Emma inside. The invisible wall of suspicion without evidence, of fear without proof, grew around Thomas Brennan. He seemed unaware or unconcerned. His routine never changed. Years passed. 2010, 2015, 2020. The Sofia Ramirez case remained unsolved. In Sacramento, Maria and Eduardo Ramirez grew older. Their hair turned gray. Their bodies slowed, but their hope never entirely disappeared. Every year on the anniversary of Sofia's disappearance, Maria called the tip line. She asked if there were any updates. The answers were always the same. No new information. The case remains open. We have not forgotten, but the words felt hollow, routine, scripted responses to a grief that had no script. The investigation had produced boxes of reports, witness statements, search records, and photographs that sat in evidence storage. Detectives had retired. New investigators had reviewed the files. Everyone reached the same conclusion. Sofia Ramirez had disappeared. The most likely scenario involved abduction. The proximity to Thomas Brennan's business was suspicious. But without evidence, without witnesses, without a body, the case could not move forward. It sat frozen in time, just like the moment when Sofia had walked down those stairs and waved to her neighbor for the last time. For those who have noticed the small inconsistencies in someone's story, the details that do not quite align, you understand how doubt accumulates. Deputy Richard Moss, now retired, still thought about the case. He had moved to Oregon, living near the coast in a small town where rain fell most of the year, but the case followed him. He kept a copy of the file, against regulations, in a box in his garage. Sometimes he pulled it out. He reviewed the timeline. He read his own notes from the interviews with Thomas Brennan. Something had been wrong. He had felt it then. He felt it now, years later. But feeling is not evidence. Suspicion is not proof. The file noted that Thomas had seemed too calm, too cooperative. But some people react to stress by becoming extremely controlled. The file noted the timing, that Sofia's scent trail had ended near his shop. But scent trails end for many reasons. Wind, rain, contamination. The file noted no alibi for the critical window between 8:15 and 9. But many people cannot account for every minute of their morning routine. The case remained exactly where it had been in 2000. A young woman vanished. A man who might have been involved. No evidence to connect them. In Riverdale, the corner market where Sofia had been walking that morning changed ownership in 2018. The new owner did not know the history. The reward poster that had hung in the window for years was taken down during renovations. The apartment complex where Sofia had lived was repainted and remodeled. Unit 12 housed new tenants who had never heard of Sofia Ramirez. The town moved on, as towns do. Memory is selective. Tragedy fades into local history, spoken about in past tense, if spoken about at all. But in Sacramento, Maria Ramirez kept every newspaper clipping, every news broadcast recording, every police report she had been allowed to copy. She organized them in binders, chronologically arranged. She had 14 binders by 2025. They sat on a bookshelf in the room that had been prepared for Sofia, the room that waited still, frozen in time, unchanged. Part 4. The revelation, the break in the case came from an unexpected source. In January 2025, a woman named Patricia Green contacted the Fresno County Sheriff's Department. She was 72 years old, living in assisted care in Clovis, California. She told the intake officer she had information about the Sofia Ramirez case. The officer, skeptical but obligated to follow up, scheduled an interview. Patricia had worked as a bookkeeper for various small businesses throughout the Central Valley during her career. In the year 2000, one of her clients had been Brennan Auto Repair. She had managed Thomas Brennan's books, tracking income, expenses, payroll, and taxes. She visited his shop once a month, usually on the first Monday, to reconcile accounts. On April 3, 2000, she had arrived for her regular appointment. "I remember the date specifically," Patricia told investigators, "because it was exactly 3 weeks after that girl went missing. Everyone was still talking about it. The searches were still happening." She had entered the shop through the front office. Thomas had been in one of the garage bays. She had called out to let him know she was there. He had emerged, wiping his hands on a rag. They had conducted business as usual, reviewing receipts and invoices in the small office. But something had been different that day. Patricia could not articulate what exactly. A feeling, an atmosphere. "The shop felt wrong," she said. "I had been there dozens of times. It always smelled like oil and metal. That day it smelled like chemicals, strong chemicals, bleach maybe, or something sharper." She had mentioned it. "Spring cleaning?" she had asked. Thomas had looked at her for a long moment before responding. "Just maintaining the workspace," he had said. The explanation was reasonable. Shops needed cleaning. But Patricia remembered feeling uneasy. She had finished her work quickly and left. Clear's throat. In the weeks following, Patricia had noticed other things. Discrepancies in the shop's financial records. In March 2000, Thomas had made several unusual purchases. Supplies that did not match his typical orders. Heavy-duty plastic sheeting. Industrial cleaning solvents. A new set of tools from a supplier he had not used before. In early April, he had paid for unusual services. A deep cleaning of the shop's concrete floor by a professional company. Disposal fees for what was listed as mixed waste materials. Patricia had not thought much of it at the time. Business owners made purchases. They hired cleaners. But after Sofia disappeared, after the investigation focused briefly on Thomas before stalling, Patricia had wondered. She had kept copies of the financial records, as was her practice, but she had said nothing. She had told herself it meant nothing. She had no proof of anything wrong. And suspecting someone based on purchases and a smell seemed absurd. 25 years later, facing her own mortality and the weight of decades of silence, Patricia decided to speak. "I should have said something then," she told investigators. "I have thought about it every year, that poor family. If I had spoken up, maybe things would be different." The information was turned over to cold case investigators who had been periodically reviewing the Sofia Ramirez file. Detective Laura Chen, who specialized in cold cases, examined Patricia Green's statement alongside the original investigation records. The financial records Patricia had kept showed a pattern. Unusual purchases in mid-March 2000, deep cleaning in early April, disposal of materials. None of this proved anything, but it provided new direction. Detective Chen requested a meeting with Thomas Brennan. On February 8, 2025, she and her partner arrived at the auto repair shop on Elm Street. Thomas, now 62 years old, his hair gray and thinning, met them in the front office. They explained they were reviewing cold cases. They asked if he would be willing to answer a few questions about the Sofia Ramirez investigation. Thomas agreed, just as he had in 2000. The interview was recorded. Detective Chen asked about the morning of March 14, 2000. Thomas repeated the same information he had given 25 years earlier. He had arrived at the shop around 7:45. He had been alone. He had worked on a brake job. He did not see Sofia walk past. He did not notice anything unusual. Detective Chen then asked about the purchases made in March 2000. Why had he bought plastic sheeting? Thomas paused. For covering vehicles during painting work, he said. Why had he hired a professional cleaning company? The floor needed resurfacing, he said. What had been disposed of? Old parts, waste oil, normal shop materials. The explanations were plausible. They were also impossible to verify after 25 years. Detective Chen asked if Thomas would be willing to provide a DNA sample. Thomas hesitated. "Am I under arrest?" he asked. "No," Detective Chen replied. "This is voluntary." Thomas looked between the two investigators. "Then I decline," he said. "I have cooperated with this investigation for years. I have nothing more to say." The interview ended. Thomas did not ask for a lawyer, but he had established a boundary. The investigators left. But Detective Chen now had enough to request a search warrant based on new information from Patricia Green, combined with the original suspicions from 2000. On February 15, 2025, investigators executed a search warrant at Brennan Auto Repair and at Thomas Brennan's residence. They brought cadaver dogs. They brought ground-penetrating radar. They brought forensic teams. The search lasted 3 days. In the garage bays of the auto shop, beneath layers of concrete that had been poured and repaired over 25 years, they found nothing. The house yielded nothing. But in a storage unit Thomas had rented on the outskirts of town, a unit he had maintained since 2001, investigators found a locked metal cabinet. Inside were items that changed everything. A woman's wallet, worn leather with a floral pattern. Inside the wallet, a driver's license with Sofia Ramirez's photograph. Credit cards in her name. $23 in cash. A photograph of Sofia with her family creased from being folded. Also in the cabinet, a key ring with 3 keys. 1 key fit Toyota vehicles. The others were generic house keys. Thomas Brennan was arrested on February 18, 2025 at his home. He did not resist. He did not speak except to request a lawyer. He was charged with kidnapping and murder, though no body had been recovered. The district attorney stated that the presence of Sofia's personal items, combined with the evidence of unusual purchases and behavior in March 2000, established probable cause. The arrest made national news. 25 years after Sofia Ramirez disappeared, a suspect was in custody. The community of Riverdale reacted with shock and anger. Neighbors who had lived near Thomas for decades told reporters they never suspected. He had seemed normal, quiet. He kept to himself. But yes, looking back, there had been something cold about him. Something distant. The perspective of hindsight painted new meaning on old observations. In Sacramento, Maria and Eduardo Ramirez received the call from Detective Chen. Their daughter's case had resulted in an arrest. Evidence had been found. Maria collapsed to the floor. Eduardo held the phone with shaking hands. After 25 years, they had an answer. Not the answer they had prayed for. Not Sofia walking through their door. But an answer nonetheless. Someone would be held accountable. The preliminary hearing was held in March 2025. Thomas Brennan appeared in court wearing an orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed in front of him. He stood silently as charges were read. Kidnapping, murder in the first degree, special circumstances. The prosecutor presented evidence. Patricia Green's testimony about the unusual purchases and behavior. The discovery of Sofia's wallet and keys in Thomas's storage unit. Expert testimony about the pattern of behavior consistent with concealing a crime. The defense argued that possession of items did not prove murder, that there could be explanations. That without a body, without forensic evidence directly linking Thomas to Sofia's death, the case was circumstantial. The judge found probable cause to proceed to trial. Thomas was held without bail. As this story goes to press, the trial is scheduled for later in 2025. The Ramirez family attends every court appearance. They sit in the front row, Maria clutching a photograph of Sofia from her 23rd birthday, taken weeks before she disappeared. Eduardo keeps his arm around his wife. They have waited 25 years for this moment, for the possibility of justice, for the truth to be spoken in a courtroom under oath. Those who knew Sofia, those who searched for her, those who never forgot her, watch and wait. The community of Riverdale, Forever changed by what happened on that March morning in 2000, watches and waits. The case that went cold for 25 years has returned to life. The man who lived among them, who repaired their cars, who seemed so ordinary, sits in a cell awaiting trial for the death of a young woman whose only mistake